So I run this pub in Boston, and St. Patrick's Day, it's kind of a bummer for me. Yeah, sure, it's good for business and all, but honestly, it's just a bunch of drunk dipshits in green blasting Dropkick Murphys on the jukebox and acting all Irish when they're not really. They're just faking it. They go to Ireland expecting this stereotypical Irish experience, but when they find out the whole country doesn't fit their stereotype, they get pissed off. Dude, I can't even deal. So I've got this thing I do every year. On March 17, I totally bounce from my pub, let my manager handle it, and hit up the least Irish bar I can find. I just chill there solo, getting wasted and catching college basketball games all day. This time around, I picked this tiny sushi joint in Chinatown. It's barely decorated for St. Patty's. Just some lame green streamers and a random Celtics poster. The vibe is super mellow. The music's low. The TVs are barely on. Plus, the staff hardly speaks English. It's like the ultimate spot for me. I plop onto a stool, grab a Bud Heavy, and zone in on the TV. The bar's practically empty. There's this Asian couple a few seats down, sipping Heineken and munching on sushi. And there's this dude in a red hoodie all the way at the end, just doing his own thing with a glass of wine. It's the perfect spot to kill time on my least favorite holiday. However, my chill time gets wrecked real quick. About half an hour in, the bar door slams open, and in marches this flock of 20-something chicks. They're all rocking these green "Kiss Me, I'm Irish" tees, loaded up with green beads and those headbands that are like alien antennas with shamrocks on the tips of springs. "Oh, shite," I hear the dude in the corner mutter. "Oh my God, sushi and shots!" this girl screams, and suddenly they're all freaking out. The place turns into madness as 15 girls all at once attempt to explain how to make an Irish car bomb to this bartender who's like struggling with English. And then the selfies kick off. They belt out a bit of "Shipping Up to Boston," but only know the chorus, and they keep repeating it endlessly, while each of them takes a turn taking pictures for Instagram. They're totally clueless about everyone else in the joint. I see the Asian couple next to me settle up and bounce, and I'm low-key ready to do the same, except I just got a fresh brew and I'm not about to ditch it. Then, out of nowhere, one of the girls slams into the back of my chair while I'm trying to down it, and I end up spilling it all over myself. Nobody even says sorry or looks my way. So I grab my beer and peace out to the corner, taking a seat next to the dude in the red hoodie. "Quite a scene," I mumble to him. He's like, "Bunch of manufactured mix. These tarts couldn't find Ireland on a map if their lives depended on it." He's got this slight brogue going on. "Are you Irish then?" "Aye, I guess you could say." "You don't really have much of an accent." He takes a sip of his wine. "Been here a while, long enough to lose most of it anyway." Meanwhile, on the other side of the bar, one of the girls, now pretty wasted, yells at the bartender to turn off the music. She blasts "Kiss Me, I'm Shitface" super loud from her phone, and they try to sing along, but none of them know the words. "Man, that's terrible. No Irishman would listen to that. Just plain awful. I'm with you. Came here to chill, but it seems the green nightmare follows me everywhere I go. Man after me own heart. Slanja, he says, and we clank our glasses together. These kids don't get it, you know. In Ireland, St. Patrick's Day is a serious religious day. Not all this crazy partying. Or at least it used to be. Or here now they go all out to please the tourists. They've made an Irish holiday American. Pretty ironic, right? I silently agreed. Not that I buy into any of that shit, he says. It's all a bunch of nonsense. St. Patrick? Bah! He wasn't even Irish. He was a bloody Roman citizen from the province of Britannia. Don't care much for the Catholics then? I ask. Are you Protestant? Is that why you're not wearing green? He spits on the floor. Are you colorblind, mate? Is my shirt orange? No. Catholic. Protestant. They're all a bunch of assholes. I follow the old ways. My bad, I didn't mean to offend. Let me get you a drink, I say. He nods and I signal the bartender. 2 more, please. 2? He says. Yeah, 2. A bud for me and a wine for my friend here. All right. I turn to my new buddy in the red hoodie and offer my hand. I'm Sean. He shakes it. I'm Walter. That sounds Irish, right? He chuckles. It's a Gaelic word, aye. Check this out. He nods toward the girl at the bar. She lifts this huge Guinness mug, and just as she's about to take a sip, the glass springs a leak and Guinness spills all down her front. She freaks out, slams the mug down, and starts going off at the bartender. Ulta and I crack up. How did you know that was going to happen? Because I made it happen, he chuckles. It doesn't really add up, considering he hasn't budged from his seat, but I let it slide. So, what do you do for a living, Sean? I run a bar, an Irish pub, actually, so all of this, I gesture to the chaos around us, is my life 364 days a year. I've made it a thing to dip out on St. Patty's and find a chill spot to drink and catch the basketball games. No luck this year, huh? Pretty hard to escape it in this city. All of a sudden, he gets this spark in his eye. What's this? He gestures towards another tipsy girl. She leans back in her stool and the whole thing collapses. She falls to the ground, screaming. Her friends rush over to help her out of the mess of broken stool and spilled Guinness. They start laying into the bartender again, demanding to know what kind of joint he's running. Ulta and I are losing it. Well, this is turning out to be way more fun than I thought. How about another round? I suggest. Yeah, I'll grab this one, he says, pulling out a tiny red purse from his hoodie pocket. It looks super old. He digs out a big silver coin and slaps it on the bar. It's covered in some language I can't even read. I don't think they'll take that, I say. No. He waves his hand over the coin and bam, it's a $50 bill now. He slides it over to me. You're full of surprises, huh? You have no idea, he says with a grin. Another round, and let's throw in some shots of Bushmills, and tell him he can keep the change. I order up. The bartender looks confused, but he perks up when I tell him he gets to pocket the extra cash. And here's the money shot, says Ulta, slapping his hand on the bar. He lifts it up, revealing the silver coin still there under his palm. He flips it into the air and catches it in his purse, which he tucks back into his hoodie pocket. How did you even do that? Easy, he says. I'm a Leprechaun. I chuckle, deciding to play along. The Irish are known for their humor, after all. So, like a leprechaun? Why? Are you after me, Lucky Charms? He jokes. No, I... just messing with you. Nah, mate, we're different. Leprechauns are like our cousins. We don't fix shoes or grant wishes. Instead, we drink. He raises his shot glass and knocks it back. But not Guinness or red ale. You Americans and your Guinness. Nah, that's a lie. Ale is for common folk. You leave a pitcher of ale out for me and your pub's gonna turn into a disaster zone. We prefer wine. Been sipping on it for centuries. Grapes were the one decent thing the Vikings brought with them. Got it. So, what about those pots of gold at the end of rainbows? Total myth, obviously. Though leprechauns do love their gold stash. But try to nab it from them and you're in for a big surprise. They ain't as sweet and cuddly as the cartoons make 'em out to be. Leprechauns, Cluricons, Father Rig, we're all Eastye, the good neighbors, the Fey folk. Kinda like elves or fairies. I guess what you call them here. Descended from the mighty Too Hot Day Dawning. Defeated and pushed into exile into mounds by the Milesians, your ancestors, the mortal forefathers of the Irish people. We're a majestic and noble race, and... Wait! Check this out. He signals to the bartender, who positions a glass under the Guinness tap. When he pulls the handle, the whole tap breaks apart and Guinness spurts out like a geyser, smacking the bartender in the face and sending him stumbling backwards into the back bar. Bottles crash down, shattering everywhere. Cooks and the manager rush out from the back, and everyone starts yelling in Chinese and trying to stop the flow of Guinness as the girls giggle and lean over the bar, filling their glasses from the frothing spout. Oh yeah, real noble, I remark to my friend in the red hoodie. He shrugs. Hey, gotta let loose once in a while. So the mischief part isn't just a myth then? Nah, mate, that's the best part. So you're like a fairy? I inquire. Well, not exactly how you Yanks use the word, but yeah. Aren't you supposed to live in the other world? Only seen at twilight on Halloween or something? Oh, an educated one, he says. Mostly right, but why get a pass on St. Paddy's? Something about making up for the thousands of years of persecution and genocide against my people by the Catholic Church. And only those of Irish descent can see me, which is why the bartender keeps giving you weird looks every time you order 2 drinks. I had noticed that. This was getting really weird. Okay, if you say so. But you're a lot bigger than I expected. Oh, I can make myself small if I wish. Shouldn't you be dancing a jig and wearing green? A few more D's? He raises his wine glass. And I'll start twerking if you want. As for the green thing, it's another misconception. Trooping fairies wear green. Those flashy ones prancing around in parades wearing fancy outfits, you know. Cluricons are solitary fairies, like leprechauns, brownies, and hobgoblins. Solitary fairies wear red. We're the ones you don't want to fuck with. You taking notes, buddy? Right, I say, standing up and putting on my coat. Where you going, mate? All right, dude, this has been something, but I can't handle any more of your crazy stories. It was funny for a bit, but you're clearly out there. I'm going to go check on my bar, then crash at home to sober up. Have a good one. Well, let's roll, he says, hopping off his stool. He's got to be like 4-foot nothing at best. Where do you think you're going? Well, I'm tagging along, obviously. Oh, no, you're not. I sure as hell am. You seem cool, and you own a pub. Sounds like I've found my new hangout. Make sure you keep a bottle of top-notch red wine ready for me every night. None of that cheap shit. And dinner at 8 p.m. sharp. I prefer beef, but I'll settle for mutton in a pinch. Sure thing, bro, I mutter, walking out the door and letting it slam behind me. Ulta strolls right through the door, keeping pace with me. Listen, you're not getting anywhere near my bar. Oh yeah? He says, grinning. Just try and stop me. I'd never been in a situation where I had to end someone's life until this guy showed up at my doorstep. Sure, I've squashed my fair share of bugs like mosquitoes, bees, flies, and spiders, but I've never crossed the line to take out something bigger, like a bird, dog, or cat. I've never even set up a mouse trap before. It's messed up to think about the fact that I ended a life, a real person's life, and it's something that weighs heavy on me even now. The thing is, I'm not entirely sure he was even human, and the whole memory is kind of blurry. But I did it. I know because his head's buried in one part of our yard and his body's in another. My twins, Jason and Josh, had just hit 5 and stormed in from school, all hyped up. They got this assignment from their teacher to make a leprechaun trap, a contraption meant to nab the tiny little fella, baiting him with candy. The plan was to keep the leprechaun captive, bargaining for more candy to set him free. When you really think about it, teaching a couple of 5-year-olds to snatch and ransom to get what you want sounds kind of dark, but it was a cool little project to get their creative juices flowing. When kids still buy into the whole magic thing, believing in dragons, unicorns, Santa Claus, and tooth fairies, it's a short-lived moment worth savoring. As parents, you try to keep that magic alive for as long as you can. Janet was still grinding away at work while I started putting together a leprechaun trap with my boys. The toughest part was getting them to team up and actually build the damn thing together. The real challenge was keeping myself from taking total control. This whole trap thing was right up my alley as an architect. I was already mapping out plans and blueprints in my head, thinking of using wood, pulleys, weights, and maybe even a wire snare to catch that mythical dude. But when Janet rolled in, she brought some sanity to the mix. We ditched the serious stuff for construction paper, pipe cleaners, and a sprinkle of color. And for the pot of gold, we raided the Halloween candy stash for leftover candy corn. Topped it off with a little note explaining the boys' mission and how they'd let him loose once they got their treats. So, after chowing down, we busted out some cookies and green milk, and man, did that have the boys cracking up through bath time. That pretty much capped off the evening. We decided to set up the trap by the fireplace, kind of mixing our myths and legends, but that's where the boys were dead set on leaving it. That night, Janet and I bolted upright in bed at the same time. It sounded like a full-on WWE SmackDown was going down in our living room, and it snapped us out of sleep real quick. It was like our furniture and lamps were getting tossed around in some kind of crazy frenzy. Janet bolted to Jason and Josh's room, already dialing 911. Meanwhile, I grabbed a baseball bat from under the bed and dashed downstairs. Janet was yelling at me to stay put, but you know how it is with that whole "this is my house" macho shit, so I had to check it out. As I hit the bottom step, a chair came flying out of the dark living room straight at my head. It crashed and shattered against the wall behind me. I was fuming, ready to dish out some payback for the violence. I stormed into the living room, all pumped up for a showdown, even though I must have been out of my mind, 'cause whoever was trashing our place could be packing heat. The first thing that smacked me in the face was the total disaster zone of our IKEA-decorated den. It was like the Tasmanian Devil and his crew decided to throw a rager in there. Complete mayhem. And then, tucked away in the corner, I spotted him. I know it sounds nuts, but there was a fucking leprechaun. He was standing there, about 4 feet tall, with this wild red beard that looked like it housed a whole critter community. His hands were massive for his size, like he was wearing oven mitts, but his fingers were long and skinny, with nails that looked like mini daggers. His eyes were blazing red, sunk deep into a face that looked like it had taken a beating and never bounced back. Dressed head to toe in black, suit, pants, the whole deal, except for those flashy green kicks. He pointed a finger at me, screaming in some language I couldn't even place. His teeth all gnarly and yellow, like something out of a horror flick. This wasn't your Boston Celtics mascot or that dude from Notre Dame. Nah, this guy was pure evil, radiating anger and hate. I swung that bat and let out a roar, but this thing was lightning quick. It zoomed past me, knocking me flat on my ass as it bolted out the front door. Cops showed up, took a statement, and chalked it up to probably just some wasted kids acting stupid. You know how it is around this time, right before Halloween, St. Patty's, or the 4th. People get a little crazy, doing dumb shit like vandalizing and partying too hard in public. They told us to call our insurance and mentioned they'd check the ring camera footage from the neighbors, since apparently we're the only ones on the block without one. Janet gave me that look when she heard about the camera. She'd been riding my case for years about getting one ever since we had a couple of Amazon packages vanish. But here's the kicker. Deep down, I knew it wasn't just some drunk kids messing around. I didn't spill all the beans to the cops because I knew they'd give me that skeptical side eye. Plus, honestly, I wasn't even sure what I saw myself. It was dark. I'd just woken up. Did I really see anything at all? The cops told us to leave everything as is for the insurance company, so we left the place looking like a war zone. While Janet headed back upstairs, I did a sweep of all the windows and doors. That's when I stumbled upon the boys' wrecked leprechaun trap. And there, on the back of their note, someone had scrawled something in red ink. I squinted at the writing. It looked like nonsense. Bamahaith Leom Kad Islamisa no ni Leonda Agunsai Solis. Time to fire up Google Translate. Turns out, it wasn't gibberish at all, but Gaelic, Old Irish. After plugging it in, I leaned back, stunned by what I read. I want what's mine, or their lights won't shine. Gold for me, or death to thee. It was a straight-up threat against my family. A direct challenge to the safety of my wife and kids. And I know who left it. Not some high schooler, but a fucking leprechaun we somehow managed to summon with our trap. Or maybe, just maybe, it was some jerk pulling a twisted prank at my expense. My mind was racing all over the place. I crumpled up the note and stuffed it into my sweatpants, deciding it was time to call it a night. The next day, Janet was on a mission, chatting up some security company to fortify our place with cameras that'd make Area 51 look chill. Meanwhile, the insurance guy showed up and threw a bucket of cold water on our hopes, saying we'd probably only get peanuts to replace everything. Jason and Josh were totally clueless about the real deal. They just went with our story. According to them, Dad's goof-up left the windows open and a mega wind gust turned our living room into a tornado zone. But they were stoked that their trap did the trick. The massive pile of mini Snickers and Milky Way bars on the kitchen counter was proof enough. After dinner, a bunch of bedtime stories, and a serious sugar rush, the boys somehow conked out, even though they basically inhaled half the candy bowl. Janet and I were yanked from sleep once more, this time by Jason and Josh's screams cutting through the silence of the night. We bolted into their room, both of us on edge. The twins were huddled together on Josh's bed, tears rolling down their cheeks as they pointed wildly at the closet. They swore up and down there was some tiny dude with red eyes whispering creepy stuff to them. Janet swooped in, scooping them up and comforting them with calming words like, "It's just a bad dream, just a spooky dream." But how could they both have the exact same nightmare? I slipped back into their room solo, no bat in hand for backup. I couldn't shake this feeling of being exposed, vulnerable. Slowly, I cracked open the closet door. No leprechaun lurking, but a mess of Jason and Josh's shirts lay ripped to shreds, torn apart by either a knife or someone's gnarly nails. I knew I had to come clean to Janet about what I saw the night before and the chilling evidence in the boys' closet. Whether she believed me or not, she needed to know what was going on. The boys were finally chilled out, sprawled out on our bed, thanks to Janet's calming vibes. I was dying to spill everything to her, as crazy as it all sounded, but with the boys right there, it wasn't the right time. I squeezed into bed, sandwiched between Janet and the boys. As I lay there, my brain was racing a mile a minute, trying to piece together how to explain the note, the shredded clothes, and the tiny dude I swear I saw in our crib. Internally, I was wrestling with how to drop the bomb on Janet that I think I clocked the leprechaun. But before I could even get a word out, Janet clocked him too. The bedroom door busted open, and there he was, the leprechaun, wielding a wooden club like he owned the place. Janet let out this ear-splitting scream. With one smooth move, the leprechaun brought the club down on one of the bedposts, shattering it like it was made of paper. The twins were freaking out, but I stayed cool as ice, rising up from the bed to face this intruder head on. I asked him straight up what he wanted. In this deep, Irish accent, he growled, "What's mine by right?" His finger, all gnarled and pointed, aimed straight at Janet. She stuttered out, "Me?" The leprechaun shook his head. "The gold be mine that you owns, or you and your kin be bones." I glanced at Janet, and her wedding ring was shining bright on her finger. Without missing a beat, I yelled at her, "Take it off! Give it to him! Your ring!" Janet, being the badass she is, didn't hesitate. The safety of her kids meant more than any sentimental value. She chucked the ring at the leprechaun, who caught it like a pro. I ordered him to hit the road. He got what he came for, but he wasn't satisfied. "More!" he growled. "You owe me more for wasting my time. Get me more, or you'll all be knocking on hell's door." And just like that, poof, he was gone. But we weren't naive. We knew he wouldn't quit. He'd always be a threat hanging over us, especially our kids. So we made a deal. We'd built a legit leprechaun trap. And when we caught him, there'd be no candy bribes. We'd finish him off. Janet and I decided to ditch work the next day, sending the boys to chill with Uncle Jeff in the next town over. Remembering the ideas Jason and Josh tossed around at the kitchen table, I dove into trap research, from tiger snare techniques to Irish folklore. With Janet by my side, we dove into the project, hitting up Home Depot like it was our second home. We transformed our shed into the ultimate trap, giving it a cave-like vibe, and after a ton of hammering and sawing, we were finally ready to roll. Janet rounded up all her bling and the fancy silverware we got from our wedding gifts. We dumped it all into a big plastic tub and plopped it right in the middle of the shed. Then we waited. Janet stationed herself upstairs, clutching a knife, keeping an eye out from the bedroom window. Meanwhile, I was outside the shed, weaponless, not trying to freak out our leprechaun visitor. Right before midnight, he materialized out of nowhere. His eyes went even redder when he spotted his stash in the shed. I watched as he strolled right in, clueless about what was about to go down. His green kicks tripped the thin nylon line, setting the whole trap in motion. A wire snare snagged his foot, yanking him up into the air. Then a 2x4 loaded with nails swung down, striking him. For the grand finale, 2 cinder blocks came together from either side of the shed. His cries echoed through the air, and dark fluid dripped from his wounds. Despite his pain, he fought to break free. I retrieved the axe from behind the shed. I'd heard somewhere that to neutralize a leprechaun, you had to separate its head from its body. With the axe ready to strike, I hesitated as the leprechaun muttered his final words. "You can't get rid of me. I'll come back from the dead. You'll see. And I've got family." After 3 whacks, his head was separated from his body. Now, a year has gone by, and on this day every month, we hit up his grave to make sure he's not back. Things seem cool for now, but his final words still give us the creeps. I've got family. So my grandpa, he was this super quiet dude, you know? He hardly ever said more than 2 sentences at a time. But everyone in our town totally respected him because he was always there to help anyone who needed it. It was kind of weird though, because the only time he ever showed any emotion was on St. Patrick's Day. He'd just lock himself up in the house and tell everyone to stay away. My fam thought he was totally odd, but we still loved him and stuff. So, like a couple of years ago, my dad asked me to drop something off at my grandpa's place. I was kind of surprised because it was on St. Patrick's Day, and my grandpa had this thing about not wanting anyone around on that day. Turns out, my dad had totally spaced on what day it was because he was all stressed from work. Anyway, I moseyed on over to my grandpa's house, which was just a quick 5-minute walk away. I got to the front door, gave it a knock, and bam! It felt like the whole house shook. I instinctively dove to the ground. When I looked up, I saw the door had this huge chunk missing from the bottom. Before I could even process what happened, the door swings open, and there's my grandpa holding a shotgun like something out of a movie. He looked totally freaked when he saw me lying there, probably thinking he accidentally blasted me or something. I quickly reassured him I was okay, and he just motioned for me to get inside ASAP. So he plopped into a chair, reloading the shotgun like he's ready to face some apocalypse, and then he starts pointing it straight at the door. I'm just standing there, feeling like I'm under a microscope with his intense stare sizing me up. Next thing, he's like, "Sit your butt down," and he disappears for a bit. Comes back after like 5 minutes, hauling this chest wrapped up in chains and locks. He dumps the chest between us, hands trembling like he's about to unearth some ancient curse or something. It takes him forever to fiddle with all the locks, but finally he cracks the last one open. He flings the chest open like he's unveiling some treasure or whatever and gestures for me to check it out. So I edge over and peer inside, feeling like I'm in the middle of an Indiana Jones movie. Dude, it seriously took me a hot minute to process what I was seeing. There's this little thing, like barely 3 feet tall, covered head to toe in this wiry black hair, and its mouth is gaping open with these teeth that could put a vampire to shame. And get this, there's this massive gold piece just chilling on its chest. Plus, it's rocking this gnarly scar that's slashing across its whole face. It's straight up surreal, man. I'm totally zoned out, staring at this thing, when my grandpa drops the bomb that it's supposed to be a leprechaun. I couldn't help but burst out laughing, 'cause seriously, this ain't like any leprechaun I've seen in movies or whatever. He just shakes his head, saying something about winners writing the history books and how people's idea of leprechauns got all twisted over time. So he slams the chest shut again and motions for me to sit down. He's back in his chair, shotgun at the ready like he's about to take on an army of goblins or something. I can tell he's torn about something, 'cause he's got this whole mix of emotions playing across his face as he starts to spill his tale. "I enlisted in the Irish military when I was young to break free from my overly religious family's expectations of me becoming a priest. My parents were domineering, thinking they could chart my entire life's course. They cut ties with me after I joined, but it didn't weigh on me much. I gained a reputation for being reliable and efficient, something my superiors valued greatly. Jerry, my commanding officer, often entrusted me with his tasks, knowing he could rely on me. One day, Jerry approached me with a troubled look etched on his face. He beckoned me to his office, insisting I keep our conversation strictly confidential. Initially, I was inclined to jest, but the gravity of his expression stopped me short. As we settled across from each other, Jerry took a moment to collect himself. Then he broached the subject of leprechauns, and I quipped about them dwelling at Rainbow's End. However, his reaction was far from jovial. It sent shivers down my spine. He went on to reveal the grim reality. Leprechauns were not mere folklore, but vicious creatures, ruthless in their pursuit of bloodshed. Most of them lurked underground, shunning human contact to wreak havoc in secrecy. He then proceeded to elaborate that a small group of these creatures had been unearthed near a lake in Lee County. For weeks now, they'd been emerging at night, slaughtering livestock. Just 2 nights prior, they'd invaded a home, mercilessly murdering an entire family, including 8 children. Their numbers were estimated to exceed 50. I sat there in stunned silence as he concluded his account. His complexion drained of color, he conveyed to me the grim task ahead. We were to hunt down and exterminate every last one of them. For the next few minutes, neither of us uttered a word as I grappled with the weight of what I had just been told. After a while, I inquired about our departure, and he informed me it would be the following morning. With that, I hurried off to gather all the necessary supplies. The next morning, Jerry, myself, and a select group of 25 seasoned troops set out. Along the way, we briefed them on our mission. One of our men, Alan, known for his smart-ass jokes, began to laugh but fell silent when he noticed the solemn expressions of his comrades. Upon reaching the site of the recent attack, Jerry, myself, and a handful of others entered the premises. The sight that greeted us was horrifying. Blood stained every surface, saturating even the ceiling. I had to fight back the urge to vomit as we swiftly retreated from the scene, taking a moment to collect ourselves outside. The other troops were sent in small groups to witness the devastation firsthand. Alan's usual grin vanished, replaced by an expression of sheer terror. Jerry commanded us to gather our gear and to get ready to move out. It took us a good hour to reach the cave suspected to be their hideout. Jerry took the lead, and we followed him cautiously, single file. The cave grew increasingly cramped, forcing us to stoop in some places. Our torches cast eerie shadows on the walls, making it seem like they were moving. We trudged on in single file, and I swear it felt like an eternity. The path seemed to lead us deeper and deeper underground. Finally, we entered a vast cavern, and we fanned out to survey the area. One of the soldiers called us over, and we approached to find gnawed bones scattered about. Initially, I was inclined to dismiss it as the work of some animal. But then it hit me like a ton of bricks. It was the remains of an infant. As we stood there in silence, looking down at the infant's lifeless form, one of the soldiers suddenly let out a scream. We hurried over to find him clutching his leg, blood seeping from a wound on the back of his leg. He recounted how something had dashed past him, slicing into his leg from behind. As he finished explaining, guttural cries echoed from all directions. Before we could even react, the leprechauns were upon us, stabbing and shrieking in their incomprehensible tongue. Their assault was over in a blink, yet they managed to take down 5 of us, dragging them away without so much as a scratch on themselves. Their diminutive size allowed them to slip past our defenses before we could even react. In the chaos, we lost our bearings and couldn't recall the entrance we came through. All the passageways looked alike. We gathered in a circle, using our torches to scan for any sign of them. Jerry appeared dazed, so I took charge, instructing everyone to ditch anything unnecessary and only carry what we truly needed. We started tracing the blood trails left by our fallen comrades, driven by a collective thirst for vengeance. Everyone's faces were etched with determination. They were hell-bent on making those creatures pay for what they'd done. We moved swiftly, hoping to catch them off guard. As we descended further, the oppressive heat closed in around us, making us all feel uneasy. Finally, we reached a massive cavern teeming with noise. Positioned on a ledge higher than the cavern floor, we cautiously crawled to the edge, surveying the scene below. My breath caught in my chest as I peered down at the scene unfolding beneath us. There, hundreds of leprechauns stood armed to the hilt, gathered in what seemed like a war council. One of them, perched on a rock, appeared to be delivering some kind of speech to the throng. Jerry motioned for us to retreat, and in my haste, I accidentally toppled a small stack of rocks, sending them clattering down into the cavern below. We leaned over the ledge once more, only to be met with a sea of hate-filled eyes staring back at us. Their leader let out a guttural command in their language, and with a blood-curdling scream, they all charged towards our position. We sprinted back to the group and unleashed our firepower on the nearest line of leprechauns. Those little boogers were tough as nails. It took a good 5 or 6 shots to bring each one down. We had to keep moving, engaging in a tactical withdrawal, all the while hearing the occasional scream as another teammate fell. Finally, we made it back to the initial cave where we'd been ambushed. We hastily formed a defensive position, creating a makeshift square. With only 14 of us left, the others either lay dead or missing. Jerry was among the missing, so the responsibility of leadership fell to me, and everyone followed my commands. The swarms of leprechauns poured out from scores of caves surrounding us on all sides. Amidst the chaos, I spotted one cave from which they didn't emerge. I knew that was our ticket to escape. They started harassing us with hit-and-run tactics, trying to wear down our spirits. It wasn't long before a couple of our troopers cracked under the pressure and ran. In a blink of an eye, they were overrun, their cries echoing in our ears as the leprechauns dragged them away. I wish I could have done something to save them, but deep down, I knew it was in vain. The onslaught kept coming for hours until our ammunition ran dry. It was just me and Alan left standing, but he was barely holding on, his legs covered in cuts. I was lucky to be unscathed, but I was running low on fumes, close to collapsing from exhaustion. All I had left to defend myself was my trusty knife, a keepsake from my childhood. My uncle had given it to me before he set off for America years ago. The leprechauns started up this eerie chant, and I watched as their leader, the same one from earlier, stepped forward, wearing this creepy grin as he stopped just a few feet away. He whipped out what looked like a sharpened bone and waited, eyeing me up. I knew our only shot at survival was for me to take him out. I had the advantage in height, but he could easily slip past my defenses. Summoning all the shaky strength I had left, I staggered toward him, gripping my knife tight. His grin widened as I got closer, and before I knew it, he lunged at me. Instinct kicked in, and I slashed out with my knife, which solidly connected. He let out a loud cry as blood streamed down his face. Seizing the opportunity, I began attacking him, but he swiftly regained his balance, moving around me as blood dripped everywhere. He managed to stab me a few times, but luckily none of the wounds were life-threatening. I noticed him stumbling as the blood obstructed his sight. Acting quickly, I lunged forward and brought him down to the ground. I repeatedly stabbed at his chest with my knife until he stopped moving. With shaky legs, I rose to my feet, scanning the scene. The other leprechauns were slinking back into their caves. I helped Alan up, and then, with a newfound strength, I hoisted the lifeless body of the leprechaun and dragged it along with us. When we surfaced, we realized a whole day had slipped by since we ventured into those caves. We shuffled back to the truck we'd come in. I rummaged around in the back until I found what I needed. Leaving Alan by the truck, I hauled the explosives back to the entrance. With a sense of complete satisfaction, I set them off, sealing the entrance and leaving those leprechauns trapped in their underground hideout. I figured I'd hang on to that leprechaun's body as sort of a trophy. I heard from a wise old woman that keeping it with some gold would preserve it. Our higher-ups weren't thrilled that only a handful of us made it back, but They were glad we got the job done. I decided to hang up my army boots not long after. The whole military thing just didn't hold the same charm for me anymore. And as for this wild tale, well, I kept it to myself. Didn't like dealing with folks thinking I'd lost my marbles, you know? I was totally quiet while my grandpa wrapped up his story. Like, seriously, it was probably the longest he's ever talked at once. If it wasn't for that body in the crate, I'd have thought he was spinning some wild tale. He went on to explain that St. Patrick's Day is like open season for leprechauns. They can roam around without anyone batting an eye. Then he glanced at the clock, lowered the shotgun, and said, "Well, it's past midnight." Before I left, he made me promise not to spill the beans to my dad about how close he came to taking me out. So things went downhill for me, and I got hooked on drugs over the next few years. It got real bad. I even started swiping stuff from my own friends and family just to get my fix. Then I remembered that gold stash my grandpa had in that chest. When I knew he was out, I broke in and grabbed it. But get this. The dead leprechaun was clutching onto it like his life depended on it. I had to, pry his hands open, and it was gnarly. After I snagged the gold, I sealed the chest back up and put the key back where it was. So last year on March 18th, they found my grandpa's body, torn to shreds. They chalked it up to some animal attack, but honestly, it was brutal. Pieces of him were everywhere, and some parts were straight up missing. But get this, no one seemed to give a damn about the chest they found in his house. It looked like something busted out of it, but nobody seemed to care. When I tried to tell people about what was inside, they just brushed me off, thinking I was high as a kite. That day, I decided to quit drugs for good. I swore to myself that I'd make things right and try to make up for whatever role I played in my grandpa's death. Lately, I've been freaking out a bit because there've been all these animal attacks going on around my place. So last night, I'm just chilling, looking out my window, when I spot this creepy little critter. It's got this gnarly scar across its face, and it's like staring right at me, almost like it's mocking me. Then, get this, it starts waving around my grandpa's face, like it's some sick trophy or something. I bolted, closed my curtains, and hid out in the bathtub, man. Now I'm hearing voices outside, and I'm praying they're just regular people and not some otherworldly creatures.